Welcome to Billionaire Love Stories. My name is Dr. Elena Morrison, and I'm 33 years old. 7 years ago, my sister told my parents the most devastating lie: that I'd abandoned medical school for a man with addiction problems. That single fabrication cost me everything. They severed all contact, blocked my calls, never showed up to my residency celebration, skipped my wedding entirely. For 7 long years, I existed as no one's daughter, erased from the family I'd grown up in. Then 3 weeks ago, my sister was rushed through the emergency room doors, unconscious, bleeding, minutes from death. The trauma team paged the chief surgeon immediately. When those doors swung open and my mother caught sight of the name embroidered on that white coat approaching her daughter's gurney, she grabbed my father's arm with such force that it left finger-shaped bruises on his skin for days. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Your support means everything as I share what happened next. Let me take you back to autumn 2018, to a worn kitchen table in Boston, Massachusetts, and the last moment my father looked at me with anything resembling pride in his eyes. Growing up in the Morrison household, there were 2 daughters, but truly only one who occupied any real space. My sister Rachel is 4 years my senior. She emerged into this world already performing theater productions, debate team captain, the teenager who could captivate any adult at any gathering and leave them charmed. My parents, Thomas and Patricia Morrison, both rooted in old Boston values, middle class through and through, absolutely adored her for it. Dad worked in industrial management. Mom handled accounting part-time for local businesses. They cherished 2 principles above everything else: reputation and compliance. Rachel embodied both flawlessly, effortlessly, every single day without fail. I was the silent one, the daughter with her face buried in molecular biology textbooks during family dinners, while Rachel commanded attention at the head of the table. I wasn't troublesome or defiant or rebellious in any conventional sense. I was simply invisible. And there's a profound difference between being actively forgotten and never having been truly seen in the first place. Here's one small memory that captures everything. 7th grade, I qualified for the Regional Science Olympiad. The only student from our entire school district to make it that far. The same exact weekend, Rachel had a community playhouse performance, some small production of our town. Want to guess which event my parents attended? When I returned home clutching a first-place trophy, Dad barely glanced in its direction before muttering, "That's nice, Elena," and returning to his newspaper. He never once asked what my project examined. He never did. I convinced myself it didn't matter, that I didn't require the validation. I channeled everything into academics, into advanced placement courses, into college applications. I decided that if I couldn't be the daughter they noticed naturally, I'd become the daughter they physically couldn't ignore through sheer achievement. And for one brief, shining, intoxicating moment, I actually was. The acceptance letter from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in April. I remember the exact day because Rachel happened to be visiting that weekend. She was 23 then, working as a junior marketing associate at some mid-tier firm in Cambridge. Decent position, decent trajectory. Decent was Rachel's absolute ceiling, though she'd have fought anyone who suggested it. Dad read that acceptance letter at our kitchen table. His eyebrows climbed his forehead. "Johns Hopkins Medicine," he said slowly, like he was tasting each word individually. "That's a genuinely prestigious institution." Then he actually looked directly at me. "Perhaps you'll accomplish something meaningful after all, Elena." It wasn't quite a compliment. Not really, not truly. But it represented the closest approximation to one I'd ever received from him in 18 years of existence. And I clung to those words like they were oxygen itself. Mom called Aunt Caroline that very evening. Called her own sister. Called 2 different neighbors. Elena got accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School. Can you even believe it? Her voice carried this pitch I'd genuinely never heard before directed at me. Pride. Authentic, undiluted, unmistakable pride focused entirely on me. At dinner that night, I glanced across our table at Rachel. She was smiling, absolutely, but it was the particular species of smile that terminates precisely at the lips. Her eyes were engaged in something else entirely, calculating, measuring, recalibrating her position in the family hierarchy. I understand that now, with devastating clarity. At that moment, I simply assumed she felt tired from her drive up from Cambridge. That week marked when Rachel started calling me regularly, 2 or 3 times weekly without fail. How's your packing coming along? Who's your assigned roommate? What's Baltimore actually like? She inquired about my class schedule, my future classmates, and my professors' names. She remembered every single detail I mentioned, every vulnerable piece of information I shared. I genuinely believed my sister was finally seeing me as an equal, as someone worthy of her attention and interest. I thought perhaps my medical school acceptance had unlocked something between us, respect, connection, whatever mysterious thing normal sisters naturally possess. Instead, I was systematically feeding her ammunition. Every detail, every name, every vulnerability, every piece of my new life. And I handed it all over with a grateful, trusting smile, never suspecting what she'd eventually construct from those materials. 3rd year of medical school. That's when my entire world fractured completely open. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were collecting your secrets like weapons? Drop a broken heart in the comments if you know exactly what I'm talking about. My roommate and closest friend was a remarkable woman named Jennifer Chan. She'd navigated through the foster care system her entire childhood, possessed absolutely no family to speak of, and she represented the singular reason I survived that brutal first year of medical school. When I called home once during a particularly crushing anatomy exam week, and Mom said, "Can't talk right now, Elena. Rachel's having a difficult day at her office," it was Jennifer who sat on our apartment floor beside me and stated firmly, "Their loss entirely. Now get yourself together. We have cadavers waiting for us to memorize." Jennifer received her diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer that August of my 3rd year. No family support system, no safety net whatsoever. Just me. I walked into the dean's office the following morning, explained the complete situation with clinical precision. He approved a formal leave of absence immediately. 1 full semester official caregiver status, all paperwork properly filed, my position held and guaranteed. I would return that January. Everything documented, everything legitimate, everything by the book. I relocated into the spare bedroom of Jennifer's small apartment, drove her to chemotherapy appointments, held her trembling hand in the oncology ward at 3 in the morning when the pain intensified so severely she couldn't catch her breath. I called Rachel to inform her of everything. I still don't fully comprehend why. Perhaps I still believe she'd transformed into the sister she'd been performing as for months. I explained everything about Jennifer, about the approved leave, about my carefully structured plan to return in the spring semester. Rachel's voice dripped with syrup-sweet concern. "Oh my God, Elena. I'm so incredibly sorry. Take whatever time you absolutely need. I won't breathe a single word to Mom and Dad. You know they just spiral into unnecessary worry." 3 days later, she called our parents with her fabricated story. I don't know her exact phrasing that night. I wouldn't learn the comprehensive scope of her deception until 7 years later when it finally unraveled in the last place any of us could have anticipated. But the damage, the absolute devastation that manifested instantly. The call came at 11:30 at night. I sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair positioned beside Jennifer's hospital bed. She'd experienced a severe reaction to her latest chemotherapy round, and they'd admitted her for overnight observation. My phone is illuminated. Dad's name. "Your sister told us absolutely everything." His voice arrived flat, arctic, emotionally frozen. The dropping out, the boyfriend, all of it. "Dad, that's completely." "Don't." He cut me off with surgical precision. "Monica showed us the messages. She provided us with proof." I pressed my palm against the cold wall to steady myself physically. "What messages? What proof?" "Dad, I'm literally sitting in a hospital right this second. I'm caring for my dying friend. Monica said you'd say exactly that." A pause that felt like falling. "She warned us you'd have a story prepared." My mother's voice entered the line then, shaking with what sounded like genuine anguish. "How could you lie to us for an entire year, Elena?" "Mom, please just listen to me for 1 minute. I filed official leave of absence paperwork. I can show you every document. I can provide you with the dean's direct number." "Enough." Dad again, his voice like gravel. "Don't call this house until you're prepared to tell us the truth. You've embarrassed this entire family sufficiently." The line went dead. Completely silent. I sat on that hospital floor for 20 minutes straight. Jennifer's phone machine beeped steadily on the other side of the privacy curtain. My phone screen still displayed the call duration. 4 minutes and 37 seconds. That's precisely how long it required for my parents to completely erase me from their lives. 20 minutes later, a text message from Rachel appeared. "I'm so sorry, Elena. I had to tell them the truth. I couldn't keep your secret any longer." Followed by a broken heart emoji. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't remotely sorry. She just executed the most precise, calculated strike of her entire life. And she'd signed it with a broken heart emoji like some kind of twisted signature. I found myself 3,000 miles from Boston. I had $41 in my checking account. And I had just become nobody's daughter. What happens when everything you've worked for gets stolen by a lie? When your own family chooses fiction over you? Part 2 will show you exactly how far that betrayal went. And trust me, you won't believe what happened next. I tried everything. I need you to understand that completely. I tried every possible method I could conceive from 3,000 miles away with virtually no money and a dying friend in the adjacent room. Over the next 7 days, I called my parents 19 times. The first 4 calls went directly to voicemail. By the 5th attempt, Dad's number showed as blocked. Mom blocked my number 3 days after that. I composed 2 emails, one brief, one extensively detailed. The longer message included my leave of absence paperwork attached as a PDF file. I included the dean's direct office phone number. I included Jennifer's oncologist's full name and contact information. I provided them with every single piece of evidence any reasonable person would require to verify the truth. Neither email generated any response whatsoever. I wrote a handwritten letter, poured my heart onto paper, mailed it priority from Baltimore. 7 days later it returned to me. Returned to sender unopened. I recognized my mother's distinctive handwriting on the envelope. She'd written those words herself. I called Aunt Caroline, Dad's younger sister, the only person in our extended family who'd ever treated me like I mattered equally to Rachel. Caroline called Dad that same evening to advocate on my behalf. I know this because she called me back 43 minutes later, her voice heavy with defeat. "He told me to stay out of the family business, sweetheart. He said, and I quote, 'You've made your bed.'" Caroline tried explaining about my legitimate leave of absence. Dad disconnected the call. 7 days. 19 phone calls. 2 comprehensive emails. 1 handwritten letter. 1 family intermediary. All of it, every single desperate attempt rejected, blocked, or returned without consideration. And here's what truly sealed my fate permanently. This wasn't new behavior. This represented the established pattern of my entire existence, just compressed into its most brutal, concentrated form. Every science fair they'd skipped. Every recital they'd forgotten about. Every single time Rachel's version of events was accepted without question while mine was dismissed immediately. This was simply the final, loudest, most devastating iteration of that lifelong dynamic. On the 8th day, I stopped attempting contact. Not because I surrendered hope, but because I finally recognized they'd made their choice years ago. Rachel had simply given them permission to stop pretending otherwise. Jennifer died on a Sunday morning in December. Quietly. Just the heart monitor's beep transforming into a flat, continuous tone and pale winter light filtering through the hospice facility window. I was the only person in that room. No one from my family called. No one knew she'd passed. The one family member I'd informed about everything, Rachel, was apparently too occupied maintaining the lie she'd planted to care that the reason for my leave of absence had just stopped breathing. I organized a small memorial service. 8 people attended. Jennifer's former foster sister drove up from Philadelphia. A couple of classmates who barely knew her. A nurse from the oncology ward who'd grown genuinely fond of her. I stood at the front of a chapel designed to hold 80 people and read a eulogy to rows of empty pews. I didn't cry. Not because my heart wasn't shattered, but because I'd been crying for 4 months straight, and there was absolutely nothing remaining inside me. That night, I sat completely alone in Jennifer's apartment, our apartment. Her favorite coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter. Her jacket still hung by the front door. I opened my laptop and stared at the application to enroll for the spring semester. Then I discovered it, tucked carefully inside Jennifer's personal copy of Grey's Anatomy, our running inside joke. She'd bookmarked the chapter on the pancreas with a yellow sticky note that read simply rude. But there was more. A handwritten card in her shaky but deliberate handwriting. Finish what you started, Elena. Become the doctor I know you are. And don't you dare let anyone, especially your own blood, tell you who you are. She'd written it weeks before she died. She knew she wouldn't physically be there when I needed that push most desperately. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. Filled out the re-enrollment form completely. 2 options existed. Crumble entirely or climb forward. I chose to climb. Not for my parents. Not for revenge. For Jennifer, and for the version of myself she believed in when I couldn't believe in myself. If you've ever had to choose between breaking down or becoming stronger, type climb in the comments. I want to see how many of us have faced that exact impossible choice. I returned to medical school that January. No family support system. No financial safety net. I secured additional student loans, accepted a part-time research assistant position that paid barely anything, and consumed hospital cafeteria leftovers more times than I'll ever publicly admit. Medical school doesn't care about your personal circumstances or emotional trauma. Anatomy examinations don't pause because your family disowned you. 12-hour clinical rotations don't shorten because you cried in the supply closet at 2 in the morning. So I stopped crying and started working. I worked like my very existence depended on it because in the most fundamental way it absolutely did. I graduated precisely on time. No one from Boston came to the ceremony. I matched into a surgical residency program at Metropolitan Medical Center back on the East Coast, a level 1 trauma center, one of the busiest facilities in all of Massachusetts. That's where I encountered Dr. Margaret Sullivan. Margaret, 61 years old, chief of surgery emeritus, built like reinforced steel wrapped in a pristine lab coat. She became the mentor I desperately needed and the mother figure I'd lost. She never asked about my family. She simply saw what I could become and pushed me relentlessly toward it. In my 4th year of residency, I met David Caldwell. He worked as a civil rights attorney, doing pro bono work at a community legal clinic near the hospital. Calm brown eyes, dry sense of humor, steady presence. The first person I told my complete story to who didn't flinch, didn't offer pity, didn't try to fix everything immediately. He just listened with complete attention. Then he said 4 simple words. You deserve much better. 4 words. That was sufficient. That was everything. We married on a Saturday afternoon in Margaret's backyard garden. 35 guests. David's father walked me down the makeshift aisle. I'd sent a wedding invitation to Boston. It returned the exact way my letter had, unopened, unacknowledged. Aunt Caroline attended though. She cried enough tears for 2 parents. More than enough. After the ceremony concluded, Margaret handed me a sealed envelope. A nomination, she said simply. Don't open it yet. You're not ready to see it. I tucked it in my desk drawer without asking questions, without looking. 7 years passed. I became someone they absolutely wouldn't recognize. Now I need to pause here for just a moment. If you've ever been in a situation where your family refused to hear your side of things, where the truth didn't matter because someone else's lie was louder and more convenient, drop a fire emoji in the comments. And if you think my parents are going to regret their choices, type the word karma. Let's keep going because what happened next? I didn't even see it coming. I built a life they knew nothing about. But Rachel spent those 7 years building something else entirely. An architecture of lies so elaborate, so comprehensive, that when it finally collapsed, it would bury everyone underneath it. Part 3 reveals exactly what she'd been doing all those years. And why? January, present day. I'm 33 years old now. I'm the chief of trauma surgery at Metropolitan Medical Center. I have a house in a quiet suburb with a front porch that captures beautiful morning light. I have a husband who makes me laugh genuinely every single day. And I have a golden retriever named Hippocrates, Hippo for short, who has never once judged me for eating cereal directly from the box at midnight. It's a good life. A real one. Built brick by brick with my own hands, my own choices, my own determination. But there's a specific kind of ache that never fully fades, no matter how successful you become, or how happy your life appears from the outside. It lives in that hollow space between your ribs, right where a family is supposed to exist. I don't wake up crying anymore. I don't compulsively check my phone hoping for a Boston area code. But every Thanksgiving there's still this moment, just a brief flash, where I set the dining table and count the plates and feel that absence like a phantom limb that aches in weather changes. Aunt Caroline still calls every Sunday without fail. She's my only thread back to that world. My only connection to the family that erased me. I never ask about them directly, but I always listen carefully when she volunteers information. Mom and Dad are healthy. Rachel got divorced 3 years ago. She's selling pharmaceutical equipment now. The irony of that particular career choice is absolutely not lost on me. Last week, Caroline called with something distinctly different in her voice. Cautious. Worried. Elena. There's something I really need to tell you about Rachel. Something concerning that I've been. Before she could finish that sentence, my hospital pager activated. Trauma activation. Level 1. I told Caroline I'd call her back immediately. I never got that chance. Because what Caroline was trying to warn me about was already hurtling down Interstate 95 at 70 miles per hour in a sedan that was about to run a red light at a major intersection. And within 90 minutes, the thing Caroline was warning me about would be lying on my operating table, bleeding out critically, with my parents in the waiting room and my name on the patient chart. I just didn't know it yet. Let me back up, because what Rachel did wasn't a single lie told once in desperation. It was a sustained campaign. Caroline had been feeding me pieces over the years, reluctantly, carefully, like she was defusing an active bomb one wire at a time. And the picture she painted was so much worse than I'd ever imagined. For 7 full years, Rachel maintained her narrative with stunning consistency. At every Thanksgiving gathering, every Christmas celebration, every single family event, she performed the role of the grieving older sister with Oscar-worthy precision. We don't really talk about Elena, she'd tell cousins with a sad shake of her head. It's too painful for Mom and Dad. She'd lower her voice, let the silence do the heavy lifting, let people's imaginations fill in the blanks. But she didn't stop at strategic silence. She added details. Specific, devastating details. She told our grandmother that I was homeless, living on the streets of Baltimore. She told Uncle Peter's wife that she'd heard from mutual acquaintances I was cycling in and out of rehabilitation facilities. She told our mother on Christmas Eve 3 years ago that she'd tried reaching out to me personally and I had refused all contact. That I was the one who'd cut them off, not the reverse. She flipped the entire story completely upside down. At Thanksgiving, Caroline told me once, her voice tight with barely contained fury, Rachel actually said, I've begged Elena to come home. She won't even answer my calls. I think she genuinely hates us. Meanwhile, I was 3 floors deep in an operating room saving a 17-year-old's life after a motorcycle accident. The absolute genius of it, and I use that word with complete disgust, was that Rachel didn't need my parents to forget I existed. She needed them to believe I had actively abandoned them. That way, their grief became proof of my cruelty. Their silence became justified. And she remained exactly what she'd always been in their eyes, the loyal daughter, the only one who stayed, the good one. She wasn't protecting them from pain. She was protecting her position in the family hierarchy. Has anyone in your life ever twisted your story? Made you the villain in a narrative you never participated in? Comment twisted if you've experienced this kind of betrayal. And there was one more thing Caroline revealed to me, something I didn't learn until much later that made the entire picture even darker, even more calculated. David told me this over coffee one morning about 8 months ago. He'd been sitting on this information for nearly 3 years, waiting for the right moment. There's something I never told you, he said, setting his coffee mug down with that careful precision he uses when he's about to deliver bad news in his lawyer voice. 3 years ago, I received a call from Human Resources at your old hospital in Baltimore. Someone using a fake name had contacted them, asking detailed questions about the employment status of Dr. Elena Morrison. They wanted to know if you'd ever been disciplined professionally, if your credentials were legitimate, if there were any complaints in your file. I stared at him across our kitchen table. Who? I had a colleague trace the inquiry back. The IP address originated in Boston. The kitchen went very quiet. Hippo's tail thumped against the floor. The coffee maker hissed. Normal morning sounds that suddenly felt surreal. She was trying to find something, I said slowly. Anything. Anything she could use, David confirmed. Anything she could weaponize to keep her story alive, to prove you were the fraud she'd claimed you were. She didn't find anything. No. Because there's nothing to find. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug, gripping it tightly. I could feel the heat bleeding through the ceramic, almost burning my palms. She didn't just lie about me once, David. She's been actively hunting me. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. That's not sibling rivalry, Elena. That's something else entirely. That's an obsession. He was absolutely right. Rachel hadn't told a lie and moved forward with her life. She had constructed an entire architecture of deception, load-bearing walls, reinforced beams, careful maintenance. And she'd spent 7 years making absolutely certain none of those structural elements cracked or failed. Every holiday story, every whispered rumor, every fake professional inquiry was another brick in that wall. Another layer of protection around the lie. I could have done something then, in that moment of revelation. Called a lawyer. Confronted my parents directly. Blown the whole thing open publicly. But I didn't. Because life was about to do it for me in the most brutal, public, and cosmically ironic way imaginable. And it started with a pager at 3 a.m. Thursday night. January. 3:07 a.m. The pager dragged me out of deep sleep. David shifted beside me, murmured something incoherent. Hippo lifted his head from the foot of the bed. The screen glowed in the darkness. Level 1 trauma. MVC single female 37. Blunt abdominal trauma. Hemodynamically unstable. 8 to 9 minutes. I was dressed in 4 minutes. Driving in 6. The roads were empty and wet, that particular shade of black that January delivers in Massachusetts. I ran through the case in my head the way I always do. Mechanism of injury. Probable organ involvement. Surgical options. Motor vehicle collision. Blunt abdominal trauma. Unstable vitals. Likely splenic rupture. Possible liver laceration. I've performed this surgery hundreds of times. Hundreds. I badged in through the ambulance bay entrance and walked directly to the trauma bay. My team was already assembling. 2 residents, a trauma nurse, anesthesia on standby. I picked up the intake tablet from the charge nurse's station and swiped to the incoming patient chart. Patient. Rachel Morrison DOB. March 8, 1987 emergency contact. Thomas Morrison, father. I stopped walking. The hallway noise, the beeping monitors, the overhead intercom, the squeak of shoes on linoleum. It all pulled back like a tide going out before a tsunami. For 2 seconds, maybe 3, I wasn't a surgeon. I wasn't the chief of trauma surgery. I was a 25-year-old sitting on a hospital floor in Baltimore, phone still warm in my hand, listening to a dial tone after my father hung up on me. Dr. Morrison? My charge nurse, Linda, appeared on my shoulder. You okay? I looked up, blinked, set the tablet down. I'm fine. Prep Bay 2 and page Dr. Patel immediately. I want him on standby. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, getting closer, getting louder. And behind that ambulance, I knew before I could see them, were 2 people I hadn't faced in 7 years. The moment I'd run from, avoided, dreaded for 7 years was about to slam into me at 60 miles per hour. My sister was dying. My parents were about to discover the truth. And I was the only surgeon who could save her. Part 4 will show you exactly what happened when those doors opened. The ambulance doors burst open and the stretcher came through fast. Rachel was strapped down, unconscious, oxygen mask fogging with shallow, irregular breaths. Blood soaked through her shirt. One hand hung limp off the side rail, completely lifeless. The paramedics rattled off vitals in rapid succession. Blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing, 2 large-bore IVs running wide open. Behind them, running, stumbling, came my parents. My mother looked like she'd aged 15 years since I'd last seen her. Hair thinner, gray now. Face drawn, hollowed out. She wore a bathrobe thrown on in obvious panic, slippers on the wrong feet. My father was in flannel pajamas and jeans thrown on without thought. His face was the color of an old newspaper. "That's my daughter," he shouted past the triage nurse, his voice breaking with terror. "Where are they taking her? I need to talk to the doctor in charge immediately." The nurse, a woman named Carla I'd worked with for 4 years, put both hands up professionally. Sir, the family needs to wait in the surgical waiting area. The trauma team is already here. The chief is handling this personally. The chief. Dad grabbed Carla's arm roughly. Get me the chief right now. Carla glanced through the glass partition toward the trauma bay. She looked at me standing there, gowned, gloved, my identification badge hanging from my scrub top. She read the name. Read it again. Her eyes went wide for just a fraction of a second. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. Not now. Carla composed herself with impressive professionalism. Sir, the chief is preparing for surgery as we speak. You'll be updated as soon as possible. Please, the waiting room is this way. My parents were led down the hallway. Mom was whispering prayers, hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone completely white. Dad kept turning back, looking through every window he passed, desperately trying to see where they were taking Rachel. She's all we have, he said to no one in particular, his voice breaking. Please God, she's all we have. I heard it through the partition glass. Every single word. She's all we have. As if I had never existed. As if I'd never been born. I stepped into the scrub room alone. 30 seconds. That's all I allowed myself. I turned on the faucet, let the water run scalding hot over my hands, looked at myself in the stainless steel mirror above the sink. Distorted, warped, the way everything felt in that moment. Scrub cap on. Badge visible. The face of a woman who had been surgically removed from her own family tree, now being asked to surgically save the woman who'd held the saw. Part of me wanted to walk out right then. Call Patel. Let someone else carry this burden. Let my parents owe their daughter's life to a complete stranger. Not to me. That would be cleaner. Simpler. Safer. But there was a woman on that operating table with a ruptured spleen and what appeared to be a grade 3 liver laceration. She was losing blood faster than we could replace it. She was going to die in the next 30 to 45 minutes if the best surgeon in this entire building didn't operate immediately. And the best surgeon in this building was me. I paged Dr. Patel directly. I have a conflict of interest. The patient is a family member. I'm disclosing it now and documenting it in the chart. If at any point my judgment is compromised, you take the lead. No questions asked. Patel's voice was steady, professional. Understood, Chief. I told Linda to note the disclosure in the nursing record. Everything by the book. Everything is documented. Everything on paper. Then I pulled on fresh gloves, pushed through the hors d'oeuvres and looked down at the table. My sister's face still bruised from impact, the oxygen mask fogging and clearing rhythmically. She looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. There were worry lines around her eyes that hadn't existed 7 years ago. For 3 seconds she wasn't the woman who destroyed my life. She was a body on my table. A patient. A case. And that was exactly how I needed her to be. Let's go, I said. Scalpel. Have you ever had to help someone who hurt you? Someone who didn't deserve your help but desperately needed it? Drop a strength in the comments if you understand this impossible position. 4 hours and 12 minutes. That's how long it took to rebuild what the steering column and the red light had torn apart. Ruptured spleen. We removed it completely. Grade 3 liver laceration. We repaired it with precision sutures, layer by painstaking layer. Internal bleeding from 2 separate mesenteric vessels. Clamped, cauterized, controlled. I didn't speak unless absolutely necessary. Suction. Clamp. Lap pad. Retract. My hands moved the way they've been trained to move. Steady, deliberate. Fast when speed mattered. Slow when precision mattered more. The residents watched. They always watched during my cases, and I could feel their attention sharpen when the liver repair got particularly tricky. I didn't falter. I couldn't afford to. At 7:19 a.m., I placed the final closing stitch. Rachel's vitals were stable. Blood pressure normalized. Output clear. She was alive. Dr. Patel, who'd been standing silently in the corner the entire time, pulled his mask down. Elena, he said quietly, using my first name for the first time in years. That was absolutely flawless. You want me to talk to the family? I peeled off my gloves, dropped them in the bin, washed my hands, automatic, methodical, the same way I'd done it 10,000 times before. No, I said. This one's mine. I caught my reflection again in the scrub room mirror. Same face. Same badge. But something fundamental had shifted. For 7 years, I'd been the daughter who disappeared. Now I was the surgeon who just pulled her sister back from death itself. Those two facts were about to collide in a waiting room 40 feet away in front of my entire night shift team. I straightened my scrub top, checked my badge one final time, took one deep breath. Then I walked toward the waiting room. The hallway had never felt so long. The waiting room had that fluorescent hush that hospitals get at 7 in the morning. 2 other families were scattered in far corners. A television murmured weather reports to no one. And in the center row, sitting rigid, sleepless, terrified, were my parents. I pushed through the double doors, still in my surgical scrubs, mask pulled down around my neck, scrub cap off now, hair pulled back. My identification badge hung at chest level, printed in clean block letters anyone could read from 10 feet away. Dr. Elena Morrison, MD, Fax Chief of Trauma Surgery. Dad stood first. He always stood first. It was an ingrained reflex, the need to be in control. Doctor, how is she? Is Rachel? He stopped. His eyes had dropped to my badge, then rose to my face, then dropped to the badge again. I watched the recognition move through him like something physical, something violent. A tremor that started in his hands and climbed to his jaw. Mom looked up half a second later. Her lips parted. No sound emerged. Her right hand shot to Dad's forearm and clamped down, fingers digging into the flannel of his sleeve with a force that would, I later learned, leave 4 distinct bruises shaped like fingertips. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds that held 7 years. I spoke first. Calm. Clinical. The exact same voice I used to address every family in this room. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, I'm Dr. Morrison, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter Rachel sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration in the accident. Surgery was successful. She's stable and currently in the ICU. You'll be able to see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Not Mom and Dad. I watched that land. I watched it cut. 7 years of lies were about to crumble in a hospital waiting room. Everything Rachel had built, every story she'd told, every lie she'd maintained, it was all about to collapse. And I was standing at the center of it, wearing the truth on my chest like armor. Part 5 shows you the final confrontation. Behind me, through the glass partition, Linda and 2 other nurses were watching. They knew. By the expressions on their faces, they'd already put it together. My mother moved first. She took a step toward me, arms lifting instinctively, a sob already breaking through her chest. Elena! Oh my God! Oh my God! Elena! I stepped back. Half a step. Polite. Unmistakable. She froze completely. Her hands hung in the air between us for a moment, then slowly, painfully, dropped to her sides. Dad's voice came out like gravel dragged over concrete. You're a doctor. I am. You're the chief. I am. But Rachel said. He stopped. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. I could see the machinery of his mind trying desperately to reassemble 7 years of certainty that was crumbling in real time. Mom was crying now. Not quietly. We thought you dropped out. We thought, she told us you were. She told you I dropped out, I said, keeping my voice level. No shaking. No tears. That I had a boyfriend with a drug problem. That I was homeless. That I refused all contact with you. I kept my voice level steady. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. In the shower, in the car, in the dark before sleep. I never imagined it would happen in surgical scrubs under fluorescent lights. None of it was true. Not a single word. Through the glass behind me, I could see Carla press a hand to her mouth. A resident, Dr. Kimura, second year, looked away, jaw tight. Linda sat down on her clipboard and stared. Dad tried to redirect. Old instinct. This isn't the time or place, Elena. Your sister is in the ICU. I know. I cut him off. I just spent 4 hours and 12 minutes making sure she survives. So yes, Dad, I'm acutely aware of where she is. He had nothing. For the first time in my life, my father, a man who had never been at a loss for a decree, who always had the final word, had absolutely nothing to say. The silence was doing the work I never could. 7 years of blocked calls, returned letters, ignored emails. None of it had made even the smallest dent. But standing here alive and accomplished and wearing the proof on my chest, that was louder than anything I could have written in a letter. Mom reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. The letters, she whispered. You said you sent letters. 2 emails with my leave of absence paperwork attached. 1 handwritten letter mailed priority. You sent it back unopened. I recognized your handwriting on the envelope. She pressed her fist against her mouth. Dad stared at the floor. I called 19 times in 7 days. I asked Aunt Caroline to talk to you. You told her to stay out of it. I wasn't accusing. I was reciting. These were facts. And facts don't need volume. Then Linda appeared at the door. She didn't know the full story. Not yet. But she had hospital business. Dr. Morrison, I'm sorry to interrupt. The board chair saw the overnight trauma log. He asked me to pass along. The physician of the year selection committee sends their congratulations on tonight's surgical outcome. Linda said it the way she'd say anything routine. She had no idea she just detonated a second bomb. Mom looked at me, eyes swollen, mascara completely gone, bathrobe still on. Physician of the year? It's an internal recognition. It's nothing. I turned to Linda. Thank you. I need to check post-op vitals. Excuse me. I walked toward the ICU corridor. Measured steps. Spine straight. I didn't look back. But I heard my mother's voice behind me, small and completely ruined. Thomas, what have we done? And I heard something I'd never heard before in my entire life. My father saying absolutely nothing. Because silence for the first time was the only honest thing he had left. For hours later. ICU room 6. Monitor beeping in a steady rhythm. Morning light angling through the blinds. I walked in for the standard post-op assessment. Vitals check. Drainage output. Wound examination. Routine. Except nothing about this was routine. Rachel's eyes were open. Glassy, unfocused from the anesthesia, but open. She blinked at the ceiling. Blinked at the 4-pole. Then her gaze tracked sideways to me. She squinted. Read my badge. Read it again. The color drained from her face in a way I've seen before, but only in patients who've just been told their prognosis is terminal. Elena. Her voice was sandpaper. Good morning, Rachel. I'm your attending surgeon. You sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration from the accident. The surgery went well. You're going to make a full recovery. You're a doctor. Not a question. A reckoning. I'm the chief of this department. Have been for 3 years. I watched it happen, the same spectrum Dad had gone through, but slower because Rachel was processing it through a morphine drip and what I suspect was dawning terror. Confusion first. Then disbelief. Then fear. And then there it was, the expression I'd seen my whole life. That quick flicker behind the eyes. Calculation. Even now, lying in a hospital bed with my sutures holding her liver together, Rachel was trying to figure out how to spin this. Elena, listen. I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me. I nodded toward the glass door where 2 figures stood in the hallway watching, faces wrecked, eyes red. You need to explain it to them. I updated her chart, checked the drain, left without another word. I didn't stay to hear what happened next, but the entire ICU floor heard it. Rachel's room wasn't soundproof, and neither was the truth. Tell me in the comments what you think Rachel told my parents when they walked into that ICU room. Did she finally tell the truth? Did she double down on the lie? Or did she play the victim again? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. I learned what happened from Linda, who heard it from the ICU nurse who heard it through the glass. The moment my parents walked in, Rachel started crying. Big heaving sobs that pulled at her stitches and made the heart monitor spike. Mom, Dad, you have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. I was scared for her. Dad stood at the foot of the bed. His voice was barely controlled. Rachel. Elena is a surgeon. She's the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital. I didn't know that. She said she sent letters. Emails. She called 19 times. She asked Caroline to intervene. Mom's voice was flat, hollow. Is that true? She's exaggerating. You know how she. Caroline tried to tell us. Dad again, and this time his voice cracked. Not from sadness. From the structural failure of everything he believed for 7 years. 3 years ago, Caroline called and said Elena was in residency, becoming a surgeon. You told us Caroline was lying, that she was trying to cause drama. Caroline doesn't know the whole story. What? Yes, the whole story, Rachel. Mom screaming in an ICU. The nurse at the station outside flinched. 2 rooms down, a patient's visitor looked up from their phone. And Rachel, backed into a corner, IVs in both arms, my sutures in her abdomen, did what she always does. She pivoted from defense to offense. Fine. She's a doctor. Good for her. But she abandoned this family. She never called because we blocked her number, Rachel. Dad's hand was on the bed rail, knuckles white. Because you told us to. The heart monitor beeped. The 4 dripped. And Rachel, for perhaps the first time in her adult life, had no script. Aunt Caroline walked into the ICU at 9:45 that morning. I'd called her from the scrub room after surgery, not to summon her as a weapon, but because Rachel was her niece too, and Caroline deserved to know. But Caroline came prepared. 7 years of silence will do that to a woman with a filing system and a long memory. She didn't sit down. Didn't hug anyone. She stood in the middle of that room and said, I've been waiting 7 years to have this conversation, and I'm not waiting 1 more minute. She pulled out her phone, opened a folder she'd labeled, I found out later, Elena proof. Inside screenshots of every email I'd sent my parents in those first desperate days. The PDF of my leave of absence from Hopkins, signed by the dean, stamped with the registrar's seal. My re-enrollment confirmation. A photo of my residency graduation, me in a cap, holding the diploma. Aunt Caroline next to me, the only family member in the frame. She held the phone out. Mom took it with trembling hands. And here, Caroline said, swiping to a text thread. This is from Rachel, sent to me 5 years ago. She read it aloud. Don't tell Mom and Dad about Elena's residency. It'll just confuse them. They're finally at peace. The room went still. Monica stared at the ceiling. Her jaw was set, but the calculation was gone from her eyes. What replaced it was something I'd never seen there before. The look of someone who's run out of rooms to hide in. You told me to keep quiet for the family's sake, Caroline said, looking straight at Rachel. But this family hasn't had peace. It had a 7-year blackout. Caroline turned to my parents. And you too, you let this happen. Not because you didn't love Elena, but because loving Rachel was easier. Nobody argued. There was nothing left to argue with. Mom sank into the chair beside Rachel's bed. But she wasn't looking at Rachel anymore. She was scrolling through Caroline's phone, reading my emails one by one. Her lips moved as she read. She stopped on the last one. The one I'd sent the night before my residency graduation. I know what it says. I've reread it 100 times in my own sent folder. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I graduated from residency today. I wish you were here. I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter. Mom doubled over in the chair. Not crying. It was beyond that. It was the sound of someone meeting the full weight of a mistake they can never undo. Dad stood at the window, his back to the room, his shoulders shaking. Caroline told me later it was the first time she had ever seen her older brother cry in 64 years of life. Not once. Not at their mother's funeral. Not when his business nearly collapsed. Not ever. He cried now. Silently. Facing the parking lot while the monitor beeped behind him. Rachel lay in the bed. She'd stopped talking. The 4 dripped. Her eyes were fixed on a point on the ceiling. There was nothing left to perform. No audience would believe her. The persona she'd worn for 37 years was lying in pieces on the linoleum, and no amount of charm or tears or clever reframing was going to put it back together. You missed her wedding, Thomas. Caroline's voice was quiet now. Spent. David's father walked her down the aisle. Do you understand what that means? Dad didn't turn from the window, but he spoke. For words low cracked down the center. What have we done? Not a question. He wasn't asking. He was convicted. Knowing the truth and knowing what to do with it, those are 2 very different things. I came back that afternoon at the end of my shift. 26 hours since the pager woke me. But who's counting? My parents were still there. Of course they were. Where else would they go? Back to the house where they'd spent 7 years pretending they only had one daughter? Mom stood up the second I walked in. Her face was swollen. Eyes nearly shut from crying. Elena, baby, I'm so sorry. I held up my hand, gently but firm. I hear you and I believe you're sorry. But sorry is a word. It's a starting place, not a finish line. What I need is time. Dad turned from the window. He looked like he'd aged 7 years since that morning. We want to make this right. Then you need to understand something. I kept my voice even. This wasn't anger. This was clarity. The kind that only comes after you've burned through every other emotion, and what's left is the truth, clean and simple. I'm not the girl you sent away. I'm not the girl who begged you to listen for 7 days from 3,000 miles away. I'm someone who built a life. A whole life without you. And if you want to be part of it now, it will be on my terms. Not Rachel's. Not yours. Mine. Dad opened his mouth. Old reflex. Then he closed it and nodded. A small, devastated nod. I looked at Rachel on the bed. Her eyes were open, watching me. When you're recovered, I said, you and I are going to have a conversation. A real one. But not today. Today you're my patient. I don't mix the two. I left. Spine straight. Steps measured. I didn't turn around. I'm not closing the door. But I'm the one who decides when it opens, how wide, and who walks through. 3 weeks later, Rachel was discharged. Her incision was healing. The rest of her? Not so much. I chose the location. A coffee shop in Cambridge, halfway between her apartment and my house. Neutral ground. David came but sat at a separate table near the window, pretending to read briefs. He wasn't pretending. Rachel walked in looking like someone who'd been hollowed out. She'd lost weight. Surgery plus guilt will do that. And the confidence she usually wore like perfume was gone. For the first time in my memory, my older sister looked exactly her age. She sat down, wrapped her hands around a cup she didn't drink from, stared at the table. I didn't do preamble. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to list every lie. You know what you did. What I want to know is why. Silence. Long enough that the barista called someone's name and it echoed off the walls. Then quiet. Because you were going to be everything I wasn't. And I couldn't handle it. I let that sit. That's honest. First honest thing you've said to me in 10 years. I'm sorry, Elena. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back the years. Sorry doesn't put Dad at my wedding. Sorry don't unreturn that box Mom shipped back to me. My high school graduation things returned like I was dead to her. She looked away. Her eyes were wet. Real tears. I know the difference now. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. I also called your medical school. Twice. I tried to get them to revoke your leave of absence. I told them you've fabricated the caregiver documents. The coffee shop hummed around us. I stared at her. Your dean wouldn't listen to me. He protected you. He didn't protect me, Rachel. He believed the truth. That's not the same thing. I leaned back in my chair, took a breath. This was the part I'd mapped out the night before, sitting on the kitchen floor with Hippo's head in my lap while David reviewed it with me like a closing argument. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I said. But I'm setting conditions. Rachel nodded. Small. Defeated. You will tell the truth, the full truth, to every family member you lied to. Every aunt, every uncle, every cousin who spent 7 years thinking I was in rehab or living on the street. You will correct every single story. I will. And you'll do it in writing. An email to the family group. All 53 people. Caroline will confirm everyone receives it. Another nod. I met with my parents separately the following week. David drove me. We sat at their kitchen table. The same table where Dad had read my acceptance letter all those years ago. The same table where Rachel had smiled with just her mouth. I'm open to rebuilding, I said. But I need you to go to family counseling. Both of you. Not for me, for yourselves. You need to understand why you believed a lie about your own daughter. And never once picked up the phone to check. Dad's jaw tightened. We don't do that in this family. That's exactly why we're here, Dad. Mom put her hand on his arm. Gently. Thomas, please. He looked at her. Looked at me. Something behind his eyes cracked. Not open. Not yet. But cracked. Fine. I stood to leave, then turned back. One more thing. David's father walked me down the aisle. That happened. We can't undo it. But if you want to know your future grandchildren, you start now. Not with grand gestures, with consistency. Apologies expire. Boundaries don't. That's the difference between sentiment and structure. 2 months later. The Physician of the Year Gala. 200 people in the ballroom of the Boston Harbor Hotel. Surgeons, department heads, hospital administrators, donors, board members. Crystal glasses clinking. Name tags on lanyards. A string quartet playing something classical that nobody was listening to. I wore a simple navy dress. David was at a front table looking like he'd been born in a suit. Margaret sat beside him, arms crossed, the faintest smile on her face. The one she reserves for moments she's been engineering for years. The MC stepped to the podium. This year's Physician of the Year. A surgeon whose clinical excellence, composure under pressure, and commitment to her patients have set a new standard for this institution. Dr. Elena Morrison, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Applause. Standing ovation from the surgical staff who'd seen me work. I walked to the stage. Spotlight warm. Podium solid under my hands. I kept it short. 7 years ago, I almost quit. Not because I couldn't do the work, but because I lost the people I thought I needed to keep going. What I learned is that the people you need aren't always the ones you're born to. Sometimes they're the ones who choose you. I looked at Margaret, at David, and my team in the third row. Then I looked at the back of the ballroom. Last row. 2 seats Caroline had quietly arranged. My parents. Mom in a navy dress she'd probably bought that week. Dad in a tie he clearly hated. Both sitting with their hands in their laps, looking up at the stage with expressions I can only describe as grief and pride waging war on the same face. And sometimes, I said, the ones you're born to find their way back. Late. But here. Mom covered her mouth. Dad stood. Applause filled the rest. After the gala, Dad found David near the coat check. He stood in front of my husband for a long moment. I owe you an apology. I should have been the one. David, gracious to his core, extended his hand. With all due respect, sir, you should have been a lot of things. But we're here now. They shook hands. Dad's eyes were red. He didn't let go right away. Rachel sent the email on a Wednesday night. Caroline confirmed delivery to all 53 addresses. I didn't read it until the next morning. David brought me coffee and set the laptop on the kitchen table without a word. He knows when to give me space. It was 3 paragraphs. No excuses. No flowery language. Just the facts laid bare. She had lied about my leaving medical school. She had fabricated evidence. She had maintained the deception for 7 years. She had deliberately prevented our parents from learning the truth. She ended with, Elena never abandoned this family. I made sure they believed she did. That is entirely on me. The responses came in waves. Uncle Peter's wife called Caroline in tears. She'd repeated Rachel's rehab story at a book club 3 years ago. Cousin David in Vermont sent Rachel a one-line reply. I don't know who you are anymore. Our grandmother, Nana Rose, 91 years old, the matriarch who'd stopped asking about me at Thanksgiving because Rachel told her it was too painful. She called me directly. I'm 91 years old, she said, her voice paper-thin but furious. And I have never been lied to so thoroughly by my own blood. Elena, forgive an old woman for not seeing it. There's nothing to forgive, Nana. You were lied to. We all were. Nobody organized a boycott of Rachel. Nobody sent group texts declaring her dead to them. But the trust she'd stockpiled, the currency she'd been spending for 37 years, was gone. You could feel it in the silence after her email, in the replies that didn't come, in the invitations that quietly stopped arriving. No one punished Rachel. They just stopped believing her. And for someone who'd built her entire identity on being believed, that was punishment enough. My parents started counseling in March. A therapist in Cambridge named Dr. Rivera. Calm, direct, the kind of woman who doesn't let you dodge a question. Mom took to it immediately. She'd been carrying the weight of her passivity like a stone in her coat pocket. And the first time Dr. Rivera named it, enabling through silence. Mom broke down in the office and didn't stop crying for 40 minutes. That's what Caroline told me. I wasn't there. It wasn't my session to witness. Dad struggled. He went. He sat in the chair. He answered questions in as few words as possible. Dr. Rivera told him, Caroline relayed, that his need to be right, his refusal to revisit a decision once it was made, had been the load-bearing wall of this entire disaster. Rachel provided the lie. But Dad's pride cemented it into place. He didn't argue with her. That might have been the first sign of change. For weeks into counseling, Mom mailed me a letter. Handwritten. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I failed you," she wrote. "Not just when I believed Rachel, but every time I chose peace over fairness. Every time I let your father's temper decide what was true. Every time I saw you standing in the doorway, quiet and waiting, and told myself you were fine because it was easier than admitting I wasn't brave enough to fight for you. I read it at the kitchen table. Hippo was asleep on my feet. David was in the next room pretending not to listen. I didn't cry, but I held that letter for a long time. Then I opened the drawer where I keep things that matter. Jennifer's card. My returned letters. The wedding invitation that came back unopened. And I placed it inside. Same drawer. Different side. Progress isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just rearranging what you carry. Rachel started therapy too. Her own, separate from the family sessions. I know this because Caroline told me, and because Rachel mentioned it briefly, awkwardly, the second time we met for coffee. We've had 5 of these meetings now. Each one short. Each one stiff. Each one slightly more honest than the last. The first time, she stared at her hands and said nothing useful. The second time, she told me about the therapy. The third time, she said something that actually landed. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I want you to know I'm trying not to be that person anymore." I took a sip of my coffee. Set it down. "Then show me. Words are cheap in this family. They always have been. Show me with time." She nodded. Didn't push. Didn't perform. That was new. Do I believe her? Honestly, I don't know. I've spent a lifetime reading Rachel's performances, and I'm still not sure where her acting ends and her actual self begins. Maybe she's not sure either. Maybe that's what the therapy is for. But I believe in the possibility of change. That's all I can offer right now. She carries my surgical scar on her body. 7 inches left upper abdomen, fading from red to white over the coming year. Every time she gets dressed, every time she catches her reflection, she'll see the mark left by the sister she tried to erase. The sister who, when it mattered most, held a scalpel with steady hands and chose the oath over the anger. I carry her damage in my memory. 7 years of silence, lodged somewhere between my ribs. We're even, in the strangest, most painful way 2 sisters can be even. And maybe with enough time, enough real, unglamorous, consistent time, we'll find our way to something that isn't even. Something better. Something new. I'm sitting in my office at Metropolitan Medical Center. It's late. The hallway outside is quiet, that particular stillness hospitals have after the last visitors leave and before the night shift energy kicks in. My nameplate is on the door. My diplomas are on the wall, not because I need to see them but because the residents do. On my desk, a framed wedding photo. David, Margaret, Aunt Caroline. 35 guests. A backyard in October light. No parents in the frame. But on the bookshelf next to it, a new photo taken 4 weeks ago. Mom and Dad standing on my front porch, coats on, looking slightly lost. Dad's hands are in his pockets. Mom is mid-smile, trying too hard but trying. It's awkward. It's imperfect. It's real. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, whether you're the one who was silenced or the one who did the silencing, I want to tell you something. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if it takes 7 days or 7 years. The truth has a patient way of showing up exactly when it's needed most. You can't rush it, but you can't outrun it either. I didn't get revenge on my sister. I didn't need revenge. I became someone who didn't need it. And that turned out to be the most devastating response of all. Not a scheme. Not a plan. Just a life lived fully on my own terms. And if you're waiting for your family to see you, really see you, stop waiting. See yourself first. Build the life you deserve with the people who show up. And when the others finally turn around, let them find a door that you control. You decide when it opens. You decide how wide. You decide who walks through. That's not revenge. That's architecture. Sunday morning. First week of April. Light rain falling outside the kitchen window. The kind that doesn't storm, but makes everything look like it's being gently washed clean. I'm making French toast. David is grinding coffee beans, singing off-key to something on the radio. Hippo is stationed under the table, optimistic about crumbs. The doorbell rings. I wipe my hands on a towel and open the front door. Mom and Dad standing on the porch in their rain jackets. Dad is holding a bottle of orange juice like he's not sure what to do with his hands. Mom has a tin of homemade cookies. Her shortbread, the one she used to make for every school event of Rachel's and none of mine. Hi, Mom says. Nervous. Hopeful. Come in, I say. Coffee's almost ready. Dad steps inside, looks around the kitchen like he's cataloging everything. The house he's never been in. The life he almost never knew existed. He clears his throat. Can I help with anything? I look at him. My father, 64 years old, standing in my kitchen for the first time, asking permission to be useful. You can set the table, Dad. He nods, goes to the cabinet I point to, takes out plates, counts them, looks at me. 4. He sets them down one by one carefully, like they might break if he's not gentle. David hands him coffee. Mom hugs me at the stove. Not a dramatic movie hug, just a quiet one. Arms around me, forehead against my shoulder. No words. Holding on. Hippo thumps his tail. Rain falls outside. The French toast sizzles. It's not perfect. It's not the childhood I deserved or the reconciliation movies promise. But it's real. And real is more than I had for a very long time. My name is Dr. Elena Morrison. I'm 33 years old. And I am finally, slowly, carefully letting myself be someone's daughter again. For plates. It's a start.